Hey y'all, back again. This is Mr. Wright, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about photosynthesis and cell respiration. Notice that we put them together. They actually exist in a cycle. In simpler terms, the products of photosynthesis are also the reactants for cell respiration. And the products for cell respiration are the reactants for photosynthesis. Hence, a cycle. What one gets rid of, the next process uses. What that process gets rid of, the first process uses. And it goes around and round and round. What type of things photosynthesize? Plants, right? They've got chloroplasts. Within that thylakoid membrane, photosynthesis takes place. Again, what they get rid of are their products. Some they store as glucose, others they expel as oxygen. Fortunately for us, animal cells that need mitochondria and oxygen and glucose to cell respirate, they take those things from that first cycle, put it through their own cycle, and then they make energy. What do we use as energy in our bodies? Well, we've talked about it briefly before. It's ATP. So today we're actually going to break that down in general terms and not get too specific, but talk about what ATP is, how the body uses it for energy, and more importantly, how we cycle back, there's that word again, and recreate ATP in order to break it and get energy out of it all over again. So let's begin. What we have here is ATP. Again, that makes it look real simple. All right, A, T, and P. What does that stand for? Right here, adenosine triphosphate. So adenosine, does that sound like something we've learned before? Talking about DNA. It's adenine. The difference between adenine, or the base or nucleotide in DNA, and adenosine is that it's adenine plus a ribose sugar molecule. That gives you adenosine. Phosphate, again, we've talked about that briefly before, but that's PO4, right off the periodic table. All right, to my right, your left. And then tri, probably the most important. What's tri? It sounds like a tricycle, right? That means three. So adenosine with three phosphates attached is an energy storing molecule. Energy is actually released whenever we break those bonds. So if you've ever been walking through the woods and you step on a twig, what do you hear? Well, it cracks, snapple, pops, whatever. Okay, that's the release of mechanical energy that your ear, drum vibrates, your brain interprets that as sound. So basically, when you break things, energy is released. The same thing happens in our body, only this is chemical energy being released. So energy is released when the bonds that hold the phosphate groups together are broken. When you remove that from ATP, you now have ADP. Well, di means two, tri is three, di is two. Don't confuse this with a bilayer because the prefix bi, means two-sided. All right, whereas di means two, straight up. So you go from ATP or triphosphate down to ADP or diphosphate. So what do you have in addition? We've got an extra phosphate hanging over. We call that a free phosphate. So here's your equation. Start with ATP. Whenever you break, some cell in your body will need energy and it'll break a bond between that last phosphate. You now have ADP plus a phosphate, and most important, you have energy. Everything in your body costs energy. All right, we're going to show an example today about the neuromuscular junction and how every contraction of that sarcomere involves a few ATP. So everything costs a certain number of ATP in your body. That's why some biologists, or biochemists refer to ATP as the body's energy currency or energy, money molecule is another way I've heard it phrased. So where does cell respiration photosynthesis come in? Cell respiration takes, let me show you here. Cell respiration takes this ADP, attaches phosphate back to it, and then what do you have all over? ATP. Well, why would you want to cycle through? Exactly. You want to cycle through. That way you can take that ADP, add the phosphate back on, 2 plus 1, all of a sudden, equals 3. Love this easy math. Equals 3, and then you've got triphosphate all over again. So where in your body, let me phrase that differently, in what particular organelle in your body does mitochondria? I just gave you the answer. I am sorry. Where in your body does cell respiration take place? The answer is right here. It's pretty clear. It's mitochondria. That's what takes glucose from the food we eat, and it takes oxygen out of the air we breathe. You breathe in air, the alveoli in your lungs filter oxygen out of that. That's diffusion. That's a process we just talked about and had a test on earlier this week. The oxygen is at a high concentration in your lungs, low concentration on the other side of that membrane, so it pulls oxygen through. Now your heart and lungs work together and it puts oxygen in your blood. Now that oxygen is carried around to every cell in your body via those red blood cells, those erythrocytes. Now, once each red blood cell delivers that oxygen to the cells in particular, it diffuses through that cell membrane and finds its way to a mitochondria. The mitochondria takes that oxygen, and then it takes glucose, broken down through enzymes in the sugar that we eat and the food that we eat, and then it uses those two in a process we'll go into more detail later to actually make energy. How does it do that? It takes ADP, takes that free phosphate, puts it back together, and sure enough, now you have ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, all over again. So, to review here, we get energy by breaking those chemical bonds in the first place, and we use this cell respiration cycle to actually put the phosphate back on there to make ADP back into ATP. Pretty interesting. So, let's move on here. Here's an overall diagram of how this process works. I like diagrams. Some people learn better that way. So, sure enough, you have ATP, 1, 2, 3. Here's adenosine. Okay, here's your base, adenine. Here's the sugar molecule, ribose, like I talked about earlier. Here's your phosphate groups, ATP. There's 3 phosphates on there. What you do is you break this bond right here. Whenever you break that bond, that releases chemical energy that your body can use for anything. So here's the cell respiration cycle that's going to take place, and take this phosphate, add it back to this, and then that gives you ATP all over again. So again, we get energy from ATP by breaking these chemical bonds that exist between the second and third phosphate. What we have left over are the ADP and the phosphate by itself, and most importantly, we've got energy. What do we do with that energy? Whatever we want. All right, we can flex our muscles, we can breathe, we can blink a whole bunch, we can do whatever, right? So